Okay, we have the camera working finally. I had to update my software on my new computer for it to work. So I just tested it and it's going. So we need to get straight into it. Okay, my name is Mark Baker. I'm the author of the Shackles of Conformity series. So far, there's 3 books, and this series asks the question about free will. I I said, um, if there are laws, why do people break laws? And in the book, there's many planets. I think there's something like 192 planets in this Orion spur. If you look at a picture of the galaxy, we're kind of in a spur. We're not really in an arm. There's like the arm to the left of us and the arm to the right of us, but we're kind of in the middle in the spur. And so these aliens, long story, but they devised millennial. It's called a millennial virus, and so they did a statistical analysis on certain planets, and if the level of violence, the murder rate, the level of crime, the hostility level, it was all put into one statistic. And if it was too high, the Council of Planets had given Komodo permission, who he was put in charge of this specific department called the Office of Criminal Rehabilitation. So they were trying to rehabilitate criminals for a long time, but they weren't successful because the recidivism rate was so high. So to establish peace, and it was rather complicated, and I don't want to give too much away, but Komodo was after something, and he used his power to accomplish or to get what he wanted. But in doing so, he enslaved the minds of people who were then obedient to his authority. So basically, when you were infected with this virus, you have to do whatever you're told. And there was a process of re-education where interspecies relationships were illegal, and the hierarchy of species were listed a lot like something Hitler might do, uh, but not necessarily. But Komodo was a main character, but there was also Samuel Yellowstone. There was Arnold Fitzgerald, and Arnold Fitzgerald is the main speaker in the first book, and he also is the main speaker in the second book. In the third book, it's called "Leading into the Aftermath of Purple Slurple," and the third book actually takes place before book 1, but when you get to the end of book 3, you start on book 4. So it asks the question of free will. Is humanity competent in a planetary society of multiple alien species to retain their free will, or to get us out of the way, or rather, Komodo, which is still being revealed in book 4, was rather looking for sympathy from a group of aliens that he was highly suspicious of for a long time. He had found a star map of their planet, and there were ancient legends of these ancient aliens existing, and So the whole story, as far as how Komodo is gaining sympathy from a specific alien called the Rebel, um, well, how the two of them met is still to be revealed in Book 4, but they were in communication over during the time the Millennial 2084 virus was being distributed to planets, and the minds of human beings were taken away, stripped of their free will. So therefore, they were no threat. And during the time the Millennial 2084 virus was being used, there was no war, but there was a problem with the virus causing de-evolution, which over time species would start to de-evolve, not necessarily in a linear way, but rather in a they would turn into these slug-like creatures, and leech off the each other and the resources of the planet. But so the de-evolution was a problem. But what I really want to get at in Book 4 is, how did Komodo know? That's the big mystery. The question is, how did Komodo know that the ancient aliens had this technology? How did he get in contact with them? Now, we do know that there was a guy named Ramos Destin Apanavan who interpreted the star map and sent a signal to them, and it was with Jamie, which is Sid's now his wife. They worked together and they got an antidote. Eventually, there was something called Purple Slurple, which the Purple Slurple, when you drink it, the Millennial 2084 virus you're infected with is gone forever. Now, there was in Book 2, Malcolm, who was a supreme commander, kind of like a general for Lord Komodo. She had developed this medication that worked on people who had been given the cure. And so as long as they were given medication, the virus was still effective in inhibiting their free will. Now, what we are going to do in Book 4 is expand a lot more about this relationship between Komodo and the Atlanteans, because it has to add up 100%. And the storyline is very good to read, but you're going to be very excited to learn in Book 4 what the effect of doing some kind of political maneuver like this was. Of course, in the first two books, you get to see the direct result, but after the policy was uplifted and people were given the cure, you're going to see, well, how is Komodo going to be viewed now, and who the whole time was after the technology. So why did I'm sorry, but you could say Komodo was using his power to obtain resources and gain attention, so that when so the ancient aliens would notice him. You could say that, because they are very interested in observing the Orion Spur. They're part of the Orion Spur. They live on the ancient aliens are part of a planet called Atlantis now. They actually kind of started the primordial soup, if you will, and watched evolution. These people are They lived for millions of years. So one cohort of their people, a billion years to them might not seem as long as it does to us. Which I think human evolution has taken like a billion years or something to go from single-celled organisms to what we are now. Um, by gaining the footing, having the resources, and being able to travel around, he was an archaeologist. Komodo was an archaeologist, and he's going around looking for evidence of the Atlanteans or the ancient aliens, and he wants to contact them. He has the star map, but he doesn't know how to decipher it, and then people start working against each other. King Thaddeus and his subject or servant, he was a king, one of his citizens. Um, they actually did interpret the star map, and that's what Komodo wanted to do all along, but he was not successful at it. But the question is, in some way, Komodo saw all this happening, and it was almost like somehow he knew that this virus was going to attract the attention of the ancient aliens. So I'm still developing this plot, but I have a lot of ideas in my head, and when I write, it's crystal clear. It goes very smoothly. You might not get the answer you want right away, but I always plan on answering every single question that was left over from the previous book. That's kind of how I write. So you have a gay romance between Sam and Arnold in book 1, and then I won't give out any spoilers, but you have these space rangers who are helping to enslave the minds of people, but they're actually the psychology of a space ranger soldier type person who is obedient to Lord Komodo, and who was given permission to raise an army and rapidly terraform other planets in his solar system to rehabilitate criminals, and raise an army of space rangers. Well, his home world was actually very peaceful, and so you see how getting this resource was empowering to him, and being able to do what he wanted every single time he was able to make a decision, he got what he wanted. The political power is very good, but his main mission was to contact these ancient aliens. He was really looking for these Atlanteans. So that's all going to be talked about in book 4. Let's see what else. In book 3, there's a guy named Rufus, and Rufus is from a planet called Superbia. Let's see. Superbia is a small planet about the size of Mercury. It's got one continent in the middle and surrounded by an ocean. He has an uncle on Earth. Rufus got kicked out of school for bad behavior, bad grades, and he was gay, and the other kids didn't like him because that was against their religion. And so Rufus moves to Earth and lives with Uncle Bentley, who's also a Superbian who was sent to Earth to study humans. Specifically, he's a psychologist that studies mass hysteria. And it's on Earth that Rufus meets Carter, and Carter and Rufus. Carter was on the football team, and he ruined the playoffs, and they lost. So he didn't get a scholarship, and well, at the time, everybody hated him. Actually, he did end up getting a scholarship when he returned back to Earth from this planet called the Chorus, which is home to primarily like 85 to 90% homosexuals who migrated there to and bisexual people to have their own culture apart from the straight society like Earth, you could say. But Carter decides to leave Rufus. Rufus goes on a mental, off the mental rails, and he ends up going to counseling and things, and that's when when the connection between before book one, as book three takes place before book one, and then the connection when Rufus and Arnold are reintroduced to each other after having spent time together on a prison planet of Lord Komodo, who is a Repertoridian. They spent time on Zamumbafum together being re-educated. Arnold was sent to Zamumbafum because he was non-compliant, and basically there was an insurgency that went on at the end of book one, and Rufus was sent there because when he was escaping from the Corian jail he had been sent to after he wrecked a car and stuff, killed somebody on accident. He was spending time in jail, and him and his cellmate Siegel sneak into the Space Ranger spaceship after killing a few Space Rangers, and they discover the antidote, and they both take it. Malcolm has a machine that can detect if you have the antibodies in your system, and since Rufus did have the antibodies, he was sent to Zamumbafum because that's a planet where people who are immune to or who the virus has no effect on are sent to for re-education. So that's where book 3 meshes into book 4. Book 3 was very short. There was an issue that has basically been resolved with some friends of mine, but I have a new editor now, and so the first 3 books were edited by this guy named Chris, and he was a super cool guy, and I love him to death, but we had a falling out, and so a new editor is in office right now. Her name is Presley, and we're working on finishing up actually I'm about halfway through with book 4, and I have a lot of ideas to get to the end. So please feel free to read my books. I really encourage it. There's a lot more that went on in those books than that, but there's still a lot more questions to answer. And I will say that if you read the book, the boyfriend who died is not coming back to life. He will be remembered well, very missed, but he's not. No technology, no manipulation of the timeline, nothing like that's going to take place and bring him back. There's 3 books. Psychological Slavery, Psychological Freedom, and Leading Up to the Aftermath of Purple Slurple. I've given you basically a gist of it. So you tell me what you think about taking away free will, and if it wouldn't have caused de-evolution, if you could actually take out a piece of your brain or take a virus that would make you unable to commit a crime, should the government or should we ethically volunteer ourselves to do something like that so that crime will be reduced? Tell me what you think about that, please.